While many writers hope to change the world with their writing, Upton Sinclair is one of the few to definitively have a lasting impact on American society. He was a leading figure in the era of muckraking and made enemies of some of the wealthiest and most powerful men of his time. His writings forever changed the relationship between business, the government, and the public in America.
Upton Sinclair was born in Baltimore, 1878. He was born to a wealthy mother and an alcoholic working-class father and grew up in New York City during the Industrial Revolution. His experiences early on these two different social classes would push him to social activism later in his life. Upton Sinclair was a child prodigy and was only 14 when he enrolled in a New York City college. He began writing short stories while still in college, but a few were able to turn profit. Soon after, he was hired by the socialist newspaper Appeal to Reason.
Sinclair was commissioned by his newspaper to investigate the working conditions in Chicago's meatpacking plants. Sinclair went undercover and worked alongside slaughterhouse workers, many of whom were immigrants, in order to get a first-hand account of their working conditions. These experiences formed the basis of his novel, The Jungle. Released in 1906, The Jungle became an instant bestseller, and his sobering depictions of the meatpacking industry horrified audiences with such scenes as this. Of the butchers and floorsmen, the beef boners and trimmers, and all those who used knives, you could scarcely find a person who had the use of his thumb. Time and time again, the base of it has been slashed, till it was a mere lump of flesh against which the man pressed the knife to hold it. The hands of these men would crisscross with cuts, until you could no longer pretend to count them or to trace them. They would have no nails. They had worn them off pulling hides. Their knuckles were so swollen that their fingers spread out like a fan. Jack London famously called it the Uncle Tom's Cabin of wage slavery. Soon after its publication, the public was outraged and demanded immediate change. That same year, Congress passed the Pure Food and Drug Act to regulate the meatpacking industry. Although The Jungle brought about much-needed change, it was not the kind of change that Sinclair and the socialist movement were hoping for. The real menace to them was the exploitation of workers and the unsafe working conditions of America's factories, and not the health issues that came from eating processed meats. Sinclair went on to write a number of non-fiction works criticizing different dimensions of American society. 6 of these were published into non-fiction books and became known as the Dead Hand series. The first was The Prophets of Religion, dealt with corruption in churches. It was followed by The Goose Step and The Goslings, which criticized public and higher education. The Brass Check, subtitled A Study of American Journalism, published in 1919, is his most famous nonfiction work. Sinclair himself referred to it as the most important and dangerous book I have ever written. A brass check refers to a token that a man would be given once he enters a brothel. He would then present it to a prostitute of his choice. Sinclair used this metaphor to refer to newspapers that practice yellow journalism. As he saw it, American journalism is a class institution serving the rich and spurning the poor. Sinclair also heavily criticized media tycoon William Randolph Hearst in this book.
Sinclair would continue both writing and public activism to the end of his life. Another famous novel of his, Oil, was adapted into the 2007 film There Will Be Blood. He was arrested in 1924 at the port of San Pedro in Los Angeles while reading the Bill of Rights to dock workers on strike. He soon became involved with politics and ran unsuccessfully for governor of California in 1934 as a Democrat. He soon returned to writing fiction and nonfiction and advocating aggressively for the poor. By the time of Sinclair's death, he published more than 90 works of fiction and nonfiction.
Sinclair was a pioneer of investigative and undercover reporting. His methods of immersing himself in the lives of his characters